my attention right away. So I could read. I'll just read you the 3 brief stories. Okay, that kind of let you think about that a little bit. The 3 brief stories. Barry. I know, those allergies, people. Barry grew up with a cloud over his head. He always seemed to feel bad about things. He did not even realize he had this cloud until he went away to college, where he became aware that he did not feel as bad as he had growing up. After college, he lived at home for a few months while starting a job, until his dad told him he needed to leave. While his dad did not go into much detail, sketch, Barry realized that his dad was responding to his mom's constant complaining about all the actually insignificant extra work she had to do to keep the peace. Barry's dad said, "You should go." Okay, really? It's called being a mom. Anywho, in this later, that's me. That's my little commentary is going to be on that. It's going to be in there. If you have the book, you can see, but okay. In his later 20s, Barry realized that no matter what he did, his mom would complain. So Barry finally concluded, why bother trying to make her happy? It won't work anyway. What Barry did not realize was that his lifelong drive to mollify his constantly disgruntled mother had created a pattern of people-pleasing, even when the situation needed him to take a stand or establish boundaries. Ooh. Another great book, Henry Cloud, Boundaries. In his 20s, Barry also began to notice how critical his mother was of his father. Barry's mom ordered his dad around and verbally beat him up when he did something wrong, even in public where many others noticed, and for the smallest things. You're holding the grocery bag wrong. The main criteria for her to deliver her verbal tongue lashings was whatever irritated her at the moment. She never thanked him for anything. It seemed to get worse as they grew older. Menopause probably just nailed it in. Barry seemed to be extra sensitive to criticism. He also felt underappreciated for the good things he did. When he picked up any whiff of rejection, he would go into a funk for days or weeks. It was a merry-go-round of incidents triggering this response. And then something would happen to snap him out of it. But through it all, Barry considered himself a generally positive person, except for these 3 triggered pity party funks. No, except for these, my bad, triggered pity party funks. Barry was rather naive and seemed unable to identify the true nature of people, starting with his mother. When he got into the working world, he ran into people who tended to dominate others, but was slow to recognize them and struggled to know how to handle the situations. However, sometimes these people were so outrageous that even Barry could recognize them, but usually only when it was too late. He called one of his bosses Old Neb, after King Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, it's a good story. You should read it. Because of the arbitrary ignorance which the boss displayed, including towards Barry. Barry left the secular company to find a way to get more involved in Christian work. He wound up in a ministry environment where a few people had agendas to become famous through building their own personal kingdoms. Poor Barry. And those who sought to capture others in service to their cause. These ministry team leaders repeatedly burned people out in accomplishing project-related goals. Then the loyal workers finally, my bad. When the loyal workers finally left, the ministry leaders were upset, critical, and felt abandoned, when in fact it was their own fault. These ministry leaders were blind to it all. I can tell you some scriptures about that. It took Barry quite a bit of time to recognize these leaders for who they were. Barry was repeatedly taken advantage of, but ultimately, the subtle toxic environment became the trigger for his ultimate healing. After one particular crisis, Barry was at his wit's end and cried out to the Lord, "Help! Help!" God answered progressively, revealing to Barry that he had been dealing with a certain type of character for many, many years, starting with his mom. Ugh. The Lord also began to show Barry that he had some of the same traits as the people who had caused him so much trouble. But how could he change, and how was God involved in what had happened over the years? That's Barry's story. So, how was God involved? I don't know. That's a good question. Like reading the story about Barry, how do you think God was involved? And overall through the years, like we always say that he's working behind the scenes, and sometimes it's harder to remember that when we're kind of in that process of, in the situation. So let's dive into Sarah's story. Pardon my nose. Sarah really wanted the fairy tale love she imagined from her earliest childhood. When she hit her mid-20s, she wondered if it would ever happen. I'm in my mid-40s, almost. Then John came into her life and proceeded to sweep her off her feet with all the right gestures. While her friends were happy for her to finally find love, they also had nagging question marks, as they saw glimpses of John's side behavior, occasional snide remarks, questionable morals, and a tendency to brag. Red flag. Things did not completely add up with John, but they could not quite put their finger on it. Sarah was so eager to realize her dream that she turned a blind eye and ignored her friend's gentle questions on whether she was sure she wanted to marry John. That blind eye, I tell you, honestly, after she married, John soon became selfish, demanding, controlling, and critical. He also exhibited a penchant for schemes and reckless behavior, which further stressed Sarah. He would then deceptively, another word for deceit, deceitful, hide the schemes and their results. A thunderstruck Sarah had many questions. Why did John change? Why did she ignore the warning signs? What could she do about it? Sarah tried various ways to cope with the whole situation and struggled to avoid the increasingly negative self-worth she felt. Increasingly negative self-worth she felt. She was devastated that her great hope for love turned into a shipwreck, and what that might mean for the remainder of her life, including the impact on her children. Sarah had children, you guys. Like at first when I read it, I was like, oh, well, she could just get out. But I know she's married and stuff, but still, And then I read the last part, including the impact on her children. Sarah went in deep. Oh, and last story is Lee. So, one more. Lee grew up in a family driven to make things look good to the outside world. My phone is never that busy. I'm like serious. I mean, it's not making me look bad. I'm just saying normally it's not like that. Okay, let's restart. Lee grew up in a family driven to make things look good to the outside world. The family focused on displays of wealth, even if they had to use fake labels or go into debt to have it. There's knockoffs and generic people. They sought out those with money and flattered. They sought off those with money and flattered them in the expectation and hope that they would receive perks from the relationship. His parents had very high career expectations for Lee. He could become a doctor or lawyer. Doctor, I understand, but lawyer, how is that a high expectation? I mean, depending on what type of lawyer, of course. And that was about it. Basically, that's what the parents wanted Lee to become, one or the other. Limitations? Okay. And a little bit of the parents, it doesn't say. These expectations were not based on consideration of Lee's interests, but on their own eagerness for the prestige which would come from his success. The father dominated the family, at least in public. Oh, here we go with the mom again. And used his position as family elder to arbitrarily control and take advantage of other family members. No one could talk back or question his decisions. Okay, it's just the dad. Right on. But the mother took it even further and in private dominated the father. Dang it. I said something. Okay, anyway. The family consistently lied to each other and even more frequently lied to others outside the family. Well, if you're going to lie to each other, why would it stop there? They were obsessed with maintaining the facade that everything was okay, even when conflict was raging at the home. Lee saw his father explode at the smallest of slights, but did not realize that he had the same tendency. He told himself that when he had his own family, he would not act like his father. But when that time came, Lee changed his views and decided it was pretty nice to be at the top of the family pyramid. As a result, Lee's family became a modern version of the family model he had sworn he would not repeat. Okay, so yeah, those are the stories. They're pretty good stories. And what I'll do is I'll cut it here and I'll definitely go into the next one. I just don't want to do too much in one video because not everybody can, stay focused. But thanks for joining me in my reading time on my bed, nice and comfy. It's a great book, D.C. Robertson. The First Will Be Last. Again, a biblical perspective on narcissism. It's pretty cool. We just kind of touched the tiny, tiny top of it. And I'm going to go into another video. If you want to follow along, just go to the other video. But definitely have a notepad with paper. I didn't mention that a bit, at the first point, but I am now. And your Bible. So thanks for hanging out and stopping by and getting that